Hello my beautiful music makers. In today's video we are going to have a look at everything new in the brand new Kontakt 8. Let's go. So first off, when we open up Kontakt 8 now, we're presented with a slightly modified interface to what we had with 7. In terms of we've got some new options and some new navigation. So let's have a quick look. When we open up Kontakt now, we're presented with the library by default. Now this has been integrated along with 7. And we have our new instruments for you section at the bottom. We can minimize that away. We're not looking to pick anything new up. We've just picked up Komplete 15. We've now got instruments combined, tools, leap, loops, and one-shots. Don't worry, we're covering the leaps, loops, one-shots in the video. Instruments, it was now got a beautiful browser section in the way that we can filter by brand, filter by sound type, filter by character. And we've got an updated selection of ways to choose what we're looking for. So if I want a particular bass, we can go with the character, and I want it to be arpeggiated. It's now going to narrow that down to these 3 categories here and an individual bass in each option. In the same vein, if we've got something that we particularly like or we're after, we can search in the top, and we could search for something like brass, for example, and filter it out that way. Now combined is presets that combine multiple instances of Kontakt instruments together. In the beta version I've got here, I've got a couple of options installed, but more should be coming. So if we click on combined, we get a few options here. We can see the brand new Conflux, Evolve Mutations all installed, and the Scarabee J bass here. If we take Evolve Mutations right here, and we decide that we are going to take Industrial Genetics and open that up, what it does now is it opens up all of those combinations all in one go for us, giving us a nice stack like so. And while we're over here, we can have a look at the changes in the interface when we've got an instrument loaded as well. We see here on the left hand side, we've got tool, and then we've got instruments. Rather than having our instruments stacked only in this view here, where we have to scroll through and control each one, we now have a dedicated instrument menu over here, which we can scroll in. We can close any instrument out that we wish from here. We can solo a particular one. We also have a volume level and panning options, so we can mix and match that way better than we ever could. Also, once we're in the instrument view here, we still have the option to browse in the same way that we have the instruments combined, tools, leaps, one-shots. So we can bring anything else in without having to jump back to the library, load things back up, etc. Like we could in the past. We've kind of re-updated that integration and pulled it back, which is really good to see. If we go back to library here, and we're going to jump over to tools now, we've introduced 2 new tools. We'll cover both in depth in the video, don't worry, but they're called chords and phrases. And if we open up one of these, they will load up in the tool menu for us up here before the instruments. If we go over to leaps, we have a new set of libraries here. Currently have 4 installed. There are more with Komplete 15. I just don't have them all active just yet, and it's likely there'll be more coming in the future. Leaps are like smaller expansions for Kontakt. Much like you had machine expansions, well, you've now got smaller Kontakt expansions as well, rather than dedicated instruments every single time. They work differently. They have their own sampler and like quick sampler and quick functionality. Again, we'll dive into that in a little bit. We then have our loops. Our loops are our machine expansions for the most part, and they're now organized out in a great fashion. We can select anything here, browse through all of those individual loops. We have the ability to do search as well, so we can filter things out by a particular key that we're looking for example, which is really useful. And they come with an updated sampler built into Kontakt, which again, we'll look at as we go on. One-shots is pretty much the same story. We're able to browse through all of our machine expansions, and if you have Komplete, you have a ton of machine expansions anyway, regardless of whether or not you own machine, and you can now utilize them far more effectively than you could previously by loading up NKS or battery. So now let's do a deeper dive into the chords and phrases tool. Today's video is sponsored by DistroKid. They let me get my music out to all of the major distributors, and they do that at a price an independent artist can easily afford. If you're ready to get your music or beats out there and want to release an unlimited amount of music each year, check the link in the description below for a discount off of your first year of unlimited distribution with DistroKid. as is the trend at the minute, making everything way more accessible and giving you tools to utilize and create in maybe an area you're not as finessed in. Inside Kontakt 8, Native Instruments have introduced 2 tools, which are kind of like plugins that go before your sound libraries, and they're called Chord and Phrase. Let's have a look at them. To demo, right here, I've got Alicia's keys up. Piano just makes the most sense to demo sounds to me for most things. First thing, we'll look at chords. The idea of chords is instead of having to learn stuff like you can instead utilize this tool to help you create ideas and things maybe in a scale that you don't know. If you're not familiar with, which was A major, you might not know how to translate chords and melodies into different keys like that. The idea of this tool is to enable that ability, especially if you're something like a guitar player, you play a brass instrument. Translating something over to keys can be a lot harder. This sort of tool is going to help you out a lot in that case. So when you've got an instrument loaded up, now we have the ability down the side here to stack your instruments and load up tools. So if we select our tools here with a double click, and we need to bring the tools library up here, we have chords and phrases. Now I'm quite excited about the fact that this looks like it's a library and a menu, and chords and phrases is just part one of what they're going to start doing here. We can load up chords, and at first it gives us a preset menu of what's going to come up. We can completely customize everything we want inside it, but let's take chill. It's a nice example. Each one gives you a little listen at the progressions, and you can go through those in your own time. So if we double click, that opens up chill. So we now see over here in the top left, we've got tool, chill, and then Alicia keys. And that's represented here in our stack as well. We can see we've got the chords chill function, and then we've got Alicia keys right below it. So this is kind of an odd layout looking thing. But now if I press one key, here we get a whole chord. If we press another key, next chord, going across our progression there. Now they follow across through all of the white notes on your keyboard. So as you can see here, none of the sharps are highlighted. And you can see it goes through 1, 2, 3, and 4 across an octave each time. So if we start here at C, and then we're into our next octave. So let's go over how this thing works, because it's kind of odd looking. Up here, the very first thing, we've got a dice. This just lets us randomize the entire thing. This links in nicely with the key over here where we've got a little padlock. So if we're working on a set track and we're looking to get a chord idea in here, we would first look to set our key, for example here, F sharp or G flat in a minor scale. We could lock that. When we hit the shuffle here, or the dice, roll it, randomize, whatever you want to call it, it's going to shuffle those up, but it'll retain our key for us here, which is super important. You don't want to be changing everything over. Now we've got a new set of chords loaded, we can go. Now for me, they're definitely not as nice as what we had before, which was a nice preset of chords in terms of chill. And they were set to be in that key. They're not being forced into it. That makes a huge difference to me. Now each circle here represents our key, like I said, from C through to B. You can see each one's highlighted when we press each key. We've got a couple of things that we can do with each one. If we select it or hover over it, if we hover over it, we've got the ability to first search for a different chord type, as it were. Instead of a whole preset, an individual chord in this instance. For example, we can go chain of fifths. Catching up with you. Once we've clicked that, we can exit away and it will have that chord now loaded up for us. We can randomize like we could before, just to scan through and give some ideas. And we can do that with each one as we go through. We also have the ability to record a chord, which is really quite nice. So if I was to play something that is in F sharp, for example, so if I was to play something that was in F sharp, like that will then be recorded in for me here. If I didn't happen to like that idea, we can always change it out for, and we take record off. So we can build our own chord sets as well, which we can then play across a single octave. Now here's something you really like. You're not limited to having these inside Kontakt. It doesn't have to be a Kontakt instrument. For example, in Logic here, I often use the synth Alchemy, or synth sampler, rompler. It does pretty much everything. So what I can do here is I can take this little icon and I can drag it out and drop it into my DAW. It's going to put a different chord on every single channel, but it does give us all of the chord information as we want it. So I can very simply put these chords in a sequence that I'm after on a completely separate instrument, or just contain them within my DAW to put on anything else. And now I'm able to use the same chord structure that I've created inside Kontakt with Alchemy. As you know, if you followed this channel, I've used the NKS keyboard since its inception, the little NKS 25. See, I've still got it boxed here. One of my gripes with that system was when you pressed like a single key to get a built-in chord or a more complex chord than you were able to play on, say, your 25 keys, which is another great thing. It was always rigid, just bong, it was all the keys exactly the same time. They've added some humanize and strum function in here, which makes the world of difference. So for example, a nice sounding chord, but it's a bit rigid. Your fingers never quite hit like that. Middle finger always kind of hit first and then everything else kind of rolls into it, right? Unless you're incredibly talented and you can do it flawlessly. There's always that kind of natural like strum. So here you can see the strum for each key as it's represented. We can push that up and we get that more natural effect. It's also a way of playing the piano that can be quite interesting. Now, because of the way this works, we can automate this to be there for some and not for others, or just very subtle amount, dial it back in a bit more, very extreme. Now this combined with humanize, which ever so slightly moves the velocity, release of the notes, it would seem. I don't have a manual, by the way, because this is still a beta. It's not quite the same chord each and every time. Yeah, we're getting some subtle differences over and over. Yeah, exactly the same note each time. Pretty wild at 100, but a little bit. Not going to quite get the same velocity each time. Combine that with some strum. You've got such beautiful flexibility in there. So that is the chord tool. It's nice. I would recommend you dive into it, have some fun with it, and create some fantastic ideas. And hell, try it out on something other than just a piano. So let's have a look at the phrases tool next. Now you notice here, we can't stack tools like we could with the instruments. So we have to remove our chill tool right here. Select tools and we've got our tools open again. Let's have a look at phrases. And now we can scan through these and get an idea for what each one is. Go on then, upright band bass. Okay. So we've got the same kind of layout, as in we're using all of the main white keys, no sharps to trigger each thing. But we've got a slightly different layout in that we have to press the key to see each one. That's because we've got a MIDI progression inside each key. Now we can do the same thing before in that we can mix it up as much as we want. And it's going to pick a different preset for us. That's rife for some house drums, is it not? And if you do want to see each individual one, you can just click on these. And say we want to mix things up and we like a particular one, like this for example, we can lock this, shuffle, and that one's still going to be there for us, even though all of the others have changed. Allow us to mix and match whatever we want in that regard. Same as before, we've got the option to lock the key, so we could lock ourselves into F major here. And we wouldn't be losing anything from it. And any individual pattern that we've chosen here, we can hit to randomize here. And because we've locked our key, we're going to lock the patterns within that. I could never play that, so I'll roll with that. Now tempo wise, we can do things like half tempo. Or if we're particularly slow, maybe we want to double the tempo. As someone who usually works up at 174 BPM kind of range, I'll be doing that a lot more than this. But the option's there. Now if we want to move up or down our octave as well, that option's there for us. That's there for us if we want to work in that small range. Like I said, if we're working on a 25 key keyboard, you've got a narrow range and you might want to be able to move up and down octaves with, say, just 2 keys, but use the same pattern, like a call and response kind of octave thing. If you're on a larger keyboard, you can pretty freely do the whole range. Depends what you've got. If you're on a 2-octave keyboard, you're kind of stuck there. Now we can mix things up, and we've got some of that humanization in the fact that we can have our swing. We can have our swing set to quantize. If you don't understand how quantize relates to swing, I'll link a video there, or will it be there? I don't know, somewhere on here that will give you a nice explanation of swing and quantize values. If we put on eighths, for example, it's going to swing different sets of notes within that rhythm, as it will on, say, fourths or sixteenths. Bring the dynamics right back. And this is by default going to be linked to your modulation wheel, so you can go in real time and control exactly where you want it to be. Which is a nice touch, right? Do we want our settings to be changed global here, or just that individual pattern? Look, when we switch global off, beautiful. It's now going to be affecting just this pattern, and that also allows us to adjust our rotation point for where we want everything to start. Do we want that pause right at the start, for example? Do we want that pause to be halfway? So you're able to rotate where you want your phrases to start. And invert allows us to bring our different notes to different parts of the octave as it's played. So like bringing the melody down to the bass and the bass up to the melody kind of thing. And just like we could with the chords, we can use this right here and drag everything into our DAW, and it's going to bring just that melody out for us. We're able to then play that with, well, anything, even if it doesn't work inside Komplete. One of the massive changes in Kontakt 8 is the fact that your loop libraries, one-shots, and something new called leaps are now available easily to you in Kontakt 8. Now, you've always been able to access the machine libraries and one-shots through Battery or the NKS sampler, but with this step, the ecosystem of Native Instruments has now fully come together, in that you can get pretty much everything apart from the synths rolling inside Kontakt, which is pretty awesome, to be fair. So let's have a little look at how the loops and one-shots aspect work, and then we'll have a look at the new feature which is right in line with this, which is leaps. What you can see here is I've loaded up 2 loops from the Bump in Flavor library. And I put 2 loops in for an example I'll show you in just a sec. First things first, don't be fooled, this doesn't end here. The GUI is actually a little bit bigger than you'd believe, so you want to drag this down, and it's actually all of this here. Effectively, what's going on here, we've got info at the top of what loop we've got. Grid, off, fixed, auto or flex, your quantized rate, so 1/16th, is it snapping to grid, on, off, 0x, all of that jazz. We're basically looking at a pretty advanced quick sampler. Over here we've got mono options or voices, and you can see it in edit mode, it's not available to us. And it's important up here in the top right hand corner, we've got play, edit, send effects and perform effects. The play in this instance is not really going to show us anything. This comes into play a lot more when we've got leap involved. Send effects are obviously our send A and B with our different effects that we can put on them. We'll have a look in just a sec. And perform effects give us some live effects options, which we can see controlled down at the bottom here. If we want to put some kind of loop or sample in, it's relatively easy to do so, and we've got a nice search option here, something that we didn't have before, which allows us to find things that are in the right key, for example. So in this case, I've got a bass loop and some drums in. We need to find something else that's in A, so I could just put A in here, for example. And let's see, we've got some chords here. I don't know if it's particularly going to work, but the way that we drag it in is we can bring it over and we can drop it on any of the slots here, or we can drop it here. And you can see you can drop your sample here or in a specific key. We'll drop it in a specific key here, and that'll give us that loop option right here. So if we were to now trigger E on the keyboard, I'm going to play that loop back for us. D's our drums, C was our bass. E all the way through in our loop, and now we'll be able to play back. Definitely an issue going on with the timing, and that is something I've noticed. You have to set everything up for the most part. So at the top here we've got grid, we can have it off. You see now no grid in the background. Fix, auto or Rex, currently not on. It's not a Rex file, so to be expected. So we can have it on fixed, 1/16th. Snap to grid or zero cross. The zero cross doesn't really matter unless you're putting it in slicing mode, in my opinion, especially for the use cases that we've got here. Can be effects with the perform effects though. So we're actually playing back at a BPM of 85 here. I slowed it right down so it's complete opposite to the samples to kind of demonstrate what's going on here. In this bottom section here, we've got our tempo, and our tempo of this particular loop is 132 BPM. Our drums is 130, but I've got it at double speed, which is how we're getting this. Our bass line, 134, but I've got that out at 1 speed. The two go together. Now what we just put on E, the touch separated. It's also pulled it to the wrong key here, and that's super important. We've got the tuning set to global, but there's none set here for the drums, and it's actually set to D minor here for the bass, because we've been able to switch that key. And it's made the mistake here of grabbing the wrong key, so we need to make sure we switch that, pop it onto D. That's going to resolve the first problem for us. The other thing is the timing aspect. We might want to speed this up, so it actually plays more like this. Or half time it. Now all of this is kind of keeping it out of time, and this is why it's a good example, because everything else is set to melody. This here has the engine set to melody, drums set to melody as well, it works perfectly fine. This instance would service a lot better being split onto slice. Now we can see it's going to do a slice of the timing instead. And now it keeps that timing based on the slices on the transient and the audio. So when we play it back now, it's actually keeping everything in time because it's sliced it up and it's quantizing it to that grid effectively. Let's take our little keys thing we've got in the background here, and we can do some send effects with that. If we switch over from engine to sound, we've got our send effects just here, currently set to 0 dB. However, in the send effects, we need to make sure they've got a gain amount, because at the minute, it's not there, even though it's set to 0 dB. If we give a gain to the delay, however, my issue with that is, now everything's got it. You need to grab the individual samples and go into edit, and take them back down. And now, just this key will have it, giving us a nice little delay sound on it. That's pretty useful, right? Now we've got perform effects as well. Each of these is set onto the sharps on your keys. So, for example, we've got such, and we can press and do an immediate slowdown. Or a nice gate effect, pitch up, pitch down, all in real time, which is good fun. And we can change these out as much as we want, right? So like the half time here, for example. And we can disable these should we not want to be able to press them. So half time here, for example, disabled now. As you can see, I can press that key. It's no longer going to trigger. These, we can switch into other options. I have like a reverse grain, for example, which is also used over here. You have multiple settings of it. I don't know why you can't do it with the other keys, but here we are. Adjust the pitch, adjust the grain amount. And mix and match those up as you see fit. Any machine packs you've got installed, and I installed a whole bunch for this, and if you've had Komplete in the last few years, you get a bunch included. And if you own machine, all of them are now available to you on here, which is super useful. We can now choose any one that we like and grab the sounds and preview them straight away, which is super nice. We take our drop down here, we can go into any of the others and switch through them. For example, if I wanted to find something that was C minor, I can put in C and filter those key things out into that. There's a similar story for one-shots. Look, I can now pick out those individual options as well. If we double click on any sample we like, well, it loads into the sampler for us and we've got the same kind of situation. However, for this instance, we might want to change it from group to single, and we're now able to play our sample across the key set, including our sharps, which are no longer functioning as perform effects. We've got the basic control that you would expect in terms of a sample start time and a sample end time. And these are linked to the grid that you've got set here. If you take it to off, you can take it to anywhere you want, pop it on 0 crossing to get a nice loop point. If you then want to loop exactly a key point as well, you can bring your loop points in like so. And once we're in single mode, we've got our voice options as well, so we could switch it over to mono should we so need to. And more importantly for one shots, if we switch over to the sound option, we do have our amp as well for an attack and release. Really important if you're using drum samples or quick hits and you want to pitch them up and down. And something we didn't talk about with the loops, we do also have a filter option with a couple of different filter types, effectively neutral, juicy, mid. They're different band filters with your high pass, band pass, low pass, and your resonance has a slightly different effect depending on what type of filter you're using here. Another touch in engine, if we go into classic mode, we can switch on the SP1200 or the MP60 emulation as well. If you want to grit those samples up just a touch, much like you could with Machine. And that brings us comfortably into Leap. Now currently I've only got a couple of Leaps installed, but what we've got here are a new form of instrumentation like the expansion packs you get with Machine, but for Kontakt. Currently, these are the only ones that I have got access to, which are drum breaks. We've got some classic drum break options. And these are completely pre-set up of what we've just looked at with our loop libraries. For example here, if I'm now to play back this, we're playing back these drum breaks from here in these different loop options. And because of this sampler functionality though, we can still take everything we want, go into edit mode, and well, do whatever we want to these samples, include our own, pitch them up, change the speed and variations, whatever we see fit at the end of the day. Just to take us out, and if you've got any questions to type in the comments down below, let's have a listen to the sounds from the hot vocals. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been helpful and shown you some ideas of how you can get working with the new one-shots and loops features in Kontakt 8. I look forward to seeing you in future videos. Please do take care.